Rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof of the repair shop, each drop adding to the symphony of leaks that Daniel Reed had learned to ignore over the past 3 years. He sat hunched over a broken atmospheric regulator, his scarred hands moving with practiced efficiency, despite the tremor that never quite left his right fingers. Port Meridian wasn't the worst place a retired soldier could end up, but it wasn't far from it either. The frontier colony on Ashgar attracted two kinds of people, those running from something and those with nowhere else to go. Daniel qualified as both. The regulator sparked and he jerked his hand back with a curse that would have made his old sergeant proud. At 42, he felt twice that age. The wars had taken their toll in ways that went deeper than the burn scars on his left arm, or the knee that ached when storms rolled in. He'd spent 15 years fighting in the expansion wars, watching humanity claw its way to survival against alien coalitions that wanted Earth's resources and didn't much care about the people living there. When the fighting finally ended, Daniel found himself adrift in a galaxy that had moved on while he was still hearing explosions in his sleep. He set down his tools and stretched, his back protesting the movement. The shop was small, cluttered with salvage parts and half-finished projects. It barely made enough credits to keep him fed, but it was honest work and it kept his hands busy. That was enough most days. The sound that interrupted his thoughts wasn't part of the usual storm noise. It was too deliberate, too pained. Daniel froze, listening. There it was again, a scraping sound from the alley behind his shop, followed by what might have been a whimper. He grabbed the heavy wrench from his workbench, old instincts kicking in despite years of trying to leave that part of himself behind. The back door opened onto an alley that served as Port Meridian's unofficial dumping ground. In the dim light from his shop, Daniel could make out a shape huddled against the far wall. At first he thought it was just debris, but then it moved. He stepped closer, wrench ready, and felt his breath catch. It was a Silthari, a dragon, as humans called them, though that was a crude translation that the Silthari tolerated with barely concealed irritation. This one was young, maybe equivalent to a human teenager, and in terrible shape. Her scales, which should have gleamed even in low light, were dull and cracked. One wing lay at an unnatural angle, clearly broken, while the other seemed fused to her back. Blood, darker than human blood, pooled beneath her. Daniel had seen Silthari before, during the wars and in the years since. They were proud warriors, their empire spanning dozens of systems. They didn't end up bleeding in alleys on frontier worlds, not unless something had gone very, very wrong. The dragon's eyes opened, vertical pupils trying to focus on him. She made a sound, something between a hiss and a plea. Her clawed hand reached out, then fell back, strength failing her. Every logical part of Daniel's brain screamed at him to walk away. Helping a Silthari, especially one in this condition, meant questions he couldn't answer and attention he didn't want. Port Meridian had enough problems without him importing more. The local crime boss, Roland, had eyes everywhere, and a particular interest in anything unusual that might turn a profit. But Daniel had never been good at walking away from wounded things. It was one of the reasons he'd barely survived the wars. He knelt beside the dragon, setting the wrench aside. She flinched, trying to pull away despite her injuries. Her mouth opened, revealing rows of sharp teeth, but the threatening gesture was undercut by how badly she was shaking. "Easy," Daniel said, keeping his voice low and calm. "I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't understand English, but tone was universal. Her eyes, a deep amber color, studied him with desperate intensity. She spoke, her voice barely a whisper, the words in Silthari sounding like wind through crystal. He caught a few words he recognized from his military days. "Help, please. Don't tell." Daniel made his decision in that moment, knowing it would probably cost him. He'd made a lot of bad decisions in his life. What was one more? "Can you move?" he asked, miming standing up. She tried. She really did. But her legs buckled and she collapsed with a cry of pain. Daniel caught her before she hit the ground, surprised by how light she was. Silthari were supposed to be dense, their bones hollow for flight but reinforced. This one felt like she weighed nothing, as if she'd been starving for weeks. He carried her inside, kicking the door shut behind him. His shop suddenly seemed smaller with a dragon in it, even a small one. He cleared his workbench with one arm, scattering parts across the floor, and laid her down as gently as he could. In better light, the damage was worse than he'd thought. Her wings weren't just broken, they were ruined. Old injuries healed badly or not at all, Cuts and burns covered her body, some fresh, most old. This wasn't an accident. Someone had done this to her. Daniel pulled out his old military medical kit, the one he'd kept from his service days. His hands moved automatically, checking for life-threatening injuries first. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Heartbeat rapid but strong. The bleeding was mostly superficial, though there was a lot of it. She drifted in and out of consciousness as he worked, sometimes crying out in pain, sometimes muttering in Silthari. He caught fragments: betrayal, death, run, and once, very clearly, a word that made his blood cold: family. By the time he'd stabilized her, dawn was breaking over Port Meridian. The storm had passed, leaving the city steaming in the early heat. Daniel looked at the unconscious dragon on his workbench and wondered what kind of trouble he'd just invited into his life. She was someone's daughter. She'd been hurt badly and was running from something that terrified her, and now she was here in his shop, trusting him with her life whether she knew it or not. Daniel Reed had spent 3 years trying to forget he'd ever been a soldier, ever been the kind of man who stood between the innocent and the monsters. He'd failed, apparently. Some things were in your blood, and no amount of distance could wash them out. He pulled a blanket from his cot in the corner and draped it over her, careful of her injuries. Then he locked the shop door, pulled down the shutters, and started planning how to keep them both alive. 3 weeks had passed since Daniel found Lyra in the alley. That was what she'd told him to call her when she'd finally been conscious enough to speak. Not her full name. She'd made clear through a mixture of broken English and hand gestures. Just Lyra. Learning to communicate had been the first challenge. Daniel remembered enough military Silthari to handle basics, and Lyra was picking up English with a speed that startled him. Dragons were smart, he knew that from the wars. But watching her absorb a new language in days was something else entirely. She sat now on a makeshift bed he'd built in the corner of his shop, her broken wings folded awkwardly against her back. She was trying to repair a small power cell, her clawed hands surprisingly delicate with the tiny tools. Daniel watched from across the room, pretending to focus on his own work, while actually making sure she didn't overdo it. Her wounds had healed faster than human injuries would have. But the wings were another matter. They'd been broken so badly and left untreated for so long that they'd healed wrong. She'd never fly again. Daniel had seen enough field injuries to recognize permanent damage when he saw it. Lyra knew it too. She never talked about it directly, but he'd caught her staring at her reflection in the metal panels of the shop, her expression hollow. In Silthari culture, from what he remembered, flying was everything. A dragon that couldn't fly might as well not exist. "Done," Lyra said, holding up the power cell. Her English came out with a strange accent, all hard consonants and elongated vowels. "Works now?" Daniel took it from her and tested it. The cell hummed to life, its charge indicator glowing steady green. "Perfect. You're getting good at this." Something like pride flickered across her reptilian features. Among Silthari, emotional expressions were more subtle than with humans, but Daniel had learned to read the small signs. The way her crest flattened when she was nervous, how her tail moved when she was concentrating. "You teach good," she said, then frowned. "Teach well. You teach well. Your English is coming along, must learn. Cannot stay silent." Her amber eyes met his. "Dangerous if I cannot speak." She wasn't wrong. Port Meridian was getting more dangerous by the day. Roland's gang had increased their patrols, and rumors were spreading about something valuable hiding in the sector. Daniel had used his old military contacts to gather information, and what he'd learned made his stomach tight with worry. There'd been a coup in the Silthari Empire 6 months ago. Details were scarce, but the imperial family had been overthrown in a bloody purge. The new emperor was consolidating power, hunting down any surviving royals who might challenge his claim. Bounties had been posted across a dozen systems. Daniel hadn't asked Lyra directly, but the pieces fit together too well. A young Silthari, clearly from a wealthy family based on her education and bearing, running from something terrible with injuries that spoke of torture and attempted murder. She was someone important, or had been. "Lyra," he said carefully. "Those people you're running from. They're still looking, aren't they?" Her whole body went rigid. For a long moment she didn't answer. Then slowly she nodded. "We'll always look, until they find or until I am dead." Her voice was flat. "I'm sorry. I bring danger to you. I knew that when I brought you inside." "Why?" The question burst out of her, raw and desperate. Why help me? You are human. I am Silthari. We are not friends. Not allies. Why risk your life? Daniel set down his tools and leaned back against the workbench. How did he explain it? He wasn't even sure himself sometimes. During the wars, he said slowly, I fought beside soldiers from a dozen different species. Humans, sure, but also Kelnar, Voss, even a few Silthari who'd broken from your empire. You know what I learned? The ones who survived weren't always the strongest or the best fighters. They were the ones who had each other's backs when it mattered. But war is finished. You owe me nothing. That's not how it works. Not for me, anyway. He met her eyes. I've seen what coups do. What people like whoever hurt you do when they get power. If I can help stop that even a little, I'm going to try. Lyra looked down at her hands, at the claws that could tear through metal but couldn't fix her broken wings. I'm not strong anymore. Cannot fight. Cannot fly. I am useless thing. The word hit Daniel harder than it probably should have. He'd heard it before, in his own head, during the dark months after he'd left the military. When his hands shook too badly to hold a gun and his knee gave out climbing stairs. When every civilian job felt meaningless after years of life-or-death decisions. You're not useless, he said firmly. You're healing. There's a difference. Silthari who cannot fly are broken. Worthless, this is truth. That's not truth. That's just what someone told you. Daniel moved closer, careful not to crowd her. I know plenty of soldiers who came home with injuries. Lost limbs, trauma, all kinds of damage. You know what made the difference between the ones who made it and the ones who didn't? It wasn't about being whole again. It was about finding a new way to matter. How? Her voice was small. How do I matter like this? You're already mattering. You fixed that power cell better than I could have. You've been helping me sort inventory. You learned English in 3 weeks. That's not nothing. Lyra's tail swished, a sign of agitation. Small things. Not important. All things start small. He gestured around the shop. This place isn't much, but it's mine. I built it from nothing after the wars when I thought I was too broken to matter anymore. You know what I figured out? Purpose isn't about what you've lost. It's about what you choose to do next. She studied him for a long moment, and he could see her processing his words. Finally, she asked, what did you lose? Daniel didn't talk about this. Not with anyone. But there was something about Lyra, about the way she watched him with those ancient eyes and a young face that made him want to be honest. I lost a lot of friends. Lost the only life I knew how to live. Lost the belief that I was doing something that mattered. He touched his bad knee absently. Lost parts of myself that don't work right anymore. For a while I thought that meant I was finished. But you are not finished. No, I'm just different now. Had to learn that different isn't the same as done. Outside, footsteps echoed in the alley. Daniel's hand moved instinctively toward the pistol he kept hidden under the workbench, but the footsteps passed by. False alarm. Lyra had noticed his reaction. They come closer, she whispered. I know. I'm working on a plan. Plan? Getting us ready just in case. I still know people. Old military friends. If things get bad, we'll have options. You plan to fight for me? She sounded incredulous. You are one human. Old soldier with bad leg. I am broken dragon. What can we do against hunters? Daniel smiled, and it wasn't a nice expression. I might be old and beat up, but I fought in the expansion wars for 15 years. Learned a few things about staying alive when the odds are bad. And you're not as broken as you think. You're strong, smart, and you learn fast. We're not helpless. Lyra looked at him for a long moment, then something shifted in her expression. Not quite hope, but maybe the beginning of it. You are strange human, she said finally. I get that a lot. Is good strange, she added quickly. You see me? Not broken dragon. Not useless thing, just me. That's because that's what you are, just you. And just you is enough. For the first time since he'd found her, Lyra's crest lifted slightly, the Silthari equivalent of a smile. It was small, fragile, but real. Daniel returned to his work, but he felt something settle in his chest. He'd spent 3 years going through motions, existing but not really living. Now, with danger closing in and a dragon he barely knew depending on him, he felt awake again. Maybe purpose found you when you stopped looking for it. Maybe it showed up bleeding in an alley and reminded you who you used to be, who you still were under all the scars and pain. The hunters were coming. Daniel Reed knew that. But they'd find something they weren't expecting when they arrived. Not a broken old soldier and a crippled dragon, but 2 people who decided they weren't done mattering yet. The message came at midnight. delivered by a nervous kid who looked too young to be working for Roland's gang. Daniel read it once, then burned it in his workbench torch. The words were simple enough. Roland wanted to see him tomorrow. Alone. Lyra watched the paper curl and blacken, her tail wrapped tight around her legs. She'd gotten better at reading human body language over the past month, and she could see the tension in Daniel's shoulders. "Is bad?" she asked. "It's not good." Daniel locked the shop door and checked the hidden compartments where he'd stashed weapons over the past weeks. Roland doesn't invite people to chat. He summons them when he wants something. What does he want? I'm guessing it has something to do with the 3 different people who've asked me about unusual aliens in the area this week. Daniel pulled out a pistol and checked its charge. "They're closing in, Lyra. We knew this was coming." She stood up, her broken wings shifting awkwardly. She'd learned to balance without them, no longer needing the wall for support, but the movement still looked painful. "I should leave. Run again. Keep you safe." "No." The word came out harder than he meant it to. "We're past that. If Roland's involved, he already knows something. Running now just makes us both targets. Then what do we do?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, weighing options. Then he made a decision that felt both reckless and right. "We stop hiding. Not completely, but enough. I tell Roland I'm protecting you because that's what humans do. Play it off as stubborn soldier syndrome. He might buy it. And if he does not buy it, then things get complicated fast." He met her eyes. "Lyra, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Who are you really?" Not just a name. The truth. She'd known this moment would come. Daniel had been patient, hadn't pushed, but he deserved to know what he was risking his life for. She sat down again, her claws clicking against the metal floor. "My name is Seraphine Lyra," she said quietly, "of the royal house, 3rd daughter of Emperor Talons and Empress Brightwing." Daniel didn't react, not visibly, but she saw his knuckles whiten as he gripped the workbench. "Princess," he said. "Not a question," was Princess. "Now I am just Lyra. My family is dead." The story came out in pieces, her English breaking down as emotion crept in. 6 months ago, her uncle Vorath had made his move. He'd spent years building loyalty among the military, promising them glory and conquest. When he struck, it was swift and brutal. The palace guards had turned on the imperial family in the middle of the night. Lyra's parents died first, executed in the throne room. Her older siblings fought back and were killed. She'd only survived because her personal guard, an old soldier named Keth who'd trained her since childhood, had gotten her out through service tunnels. He died holding off assassins, buying her time to reach a transport ship, but even escape had cost her. They'd caught up with her at the spaceport. She'd been thrown from a landing platform. Her wings shattered when she hit the ground 3 stories below. Only luck and a sympathetic freighter captain had gotten her off-world. "I ran for months," she continued. "Changed ships, hid, tried to contact loyalists but did not know who to trust. Uncle has spies everywhere. Finally came here, thought I could disappear in frontier world. But I was weak, injured, almost died before you found me." Daniel was quiet for a long time after she finished. Lyra waited, expecting rejection, maybe anger at being lied to. Instead he asked, "Does anyone know you're alive?" "Maybe, probably. Uncle posts bounties everywhere. Says I am traitor, criminal, says I killed my family." Her voice cracked. "He makes me monster in story? No one believes truth. And the people hunting you? Corvin Syndicate. Best hunters in galaxy. Uncle hired them month ago. They are close now. I can feel it." She looked at her hands, at the claws that marked her as Silthari royalty. "I am sorry. You save broken princess who brings nothing but death. Better if you let me die in alley." "Stop that." Daniel's voice was sharp. "I don't care if you're a princess or a mechanic or whatever else. You're a kid who watched her family get murdered and has been running for her life ever since. That's what matters, but you could trade me for reward. Enough money to leave this world. Start new life." "I could," he agreed. "Won't though." "Why not?" "Because I've seen what people like your uncle do when they take power. I fought against warlords and tyrants for 15 years. Damned if I'm going to help one now, even if it would make my life easier." He checked his pistol again, more for something to do with his hands than necessity. "Besides, you're not cargo. You're a person. I don't trade people." Lyra felt something tight in her chest loosen. She'd been prepared for betrayal. Everyone else had betrayed her or died trying to protect her. But this human, this scarred old soldier with a bad leg and shaking hands, stood there calmly planning to fight against impossible odds for someone he'd known barely a month. "You are a fool," she said, but there was no heat in it, probably. Daniel smiled slightly. "But I'm a fool who's kept you alive this long. Let's see if I can keep the streak going." A sound from outside froze them both. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving with purpose. Daniel killed the lights immediately and grabbed Lyra, pulling her toward the hidden compartment he'd built into the floor. She folded herself in with difficulty, her wings making it tight. "Stay quiet no matter what," he whispered. "Don't come out unless I say so. Daniel, trust me." He sealed the compartment just as the front door shook with a heavy impact. Not Roland's people, they would have knocked. This was something else. The door buckled on the second hit and 3 figures entered. They wore black armor, their movements precise and professional. Corvin mercenaries. Daniel recognized the type from the wars, hired killers who worked for the highest bidder. The leader was a woman, tall and augmented with military-grade enhancements. Her eyes glowed slightly in the darkness, scanning the shop. "Daniel Reed," she said, her voice flat and professional. "My name is Rena. I work for the Corvin Syndicate. I believe you have something that belongs to my employer. This is a repair shop. I have lots of things that belong to lots of people." Daniel kept his hands visible, casual. His pistol was in reach, but 3-on-1 against professional killers was suicide. "Don't be cute." Rena stepped forward, her hand resting on her weapon. "We tracked the princess to this sector. Multiple witnesses place an injured Silthari in this area 5 weeks ago. Then you suddenly stopped taking customers, started buying medical supplies. You're sheltering her. I help a lot of people. It's kind of my thing. I'm offering you a way out of this, Reed. Tell us where she is, accept the reward, and walk away clean. No one has to get hurt, and if I say no..." Rena's expression didn't change. "Then we take this shop apart until we find her. You can be unconscious for that part or dead. Your choice." Daniel considered his options. They were all bad. He couldn't fight 3 Corvin mercenaries. Couldn't bluff his way out. Couldn't run. But maybe he could buy time. "I want to think about it," he said. "That's a lot of money you're offering. Give me until tomorrow." "You have 1 hour," Rena said. "After that, we come back with our full team and burn this place down. Think fast, old man." They left, and Daniel waited 5 minutes before opening the compartment. Lyra emerged, shaking. "They will kill you," she whispered. "Must run now." "No." Daniel was already moving, pulling out a communicator and punching in codes he hadn't used in years. "We don't run. We fight. Fight? How? You are one human with friends." The communicator crackled to life. "Doc, yeah, it's Daniel. I need a favor." "A big one. Remember what I said about that situation? It just got real. Bring everything." He made 3 more calls. Santos, an old weapons dealer who owed him favors. Beth Hayes, who ran the spaceport and had her own reasons to hate the Corvins. And a few others, former soldiers who'd settled on Ashgar and were always looking for one more fight. Lyra watched him work, saw the transformation. This wasn't the quiet mechanic who'd taught her to fix power cells. This was the soldier he used to be, planning tactics and coordinating resources with the ease of long practice. "You really will fight for me," she said, wonder in her voice. "We'll fight for each other," Daniel corrected. He pulled out body armor from a hidden locker, started checking weapons. "You're not helpless, Lyra. You're strong and you're smart. Time to prove it, but I cannot fly, cannot fight like warrior. So we fight like humans." He handed her a close combat weapon, something she could use with her claws. Ground rules, dirty tricks, and sheer stubbornness. "You ready?" Lyra took the weapon, felt its weight, and something old and fierce stirred inside her. She was Silthari royalty. She'd survived assassination, torture, and months of running. She'd be damned if she'd hide in a hole while others fought for her. "I am ready," she said, and meant it. Outside, the hour was already ticking down. 40 minutes after Rena left, the shop looked like a fortress. Daniel's friends had come through. Doc Williams arrived first, a grizzled medic who'd served 2 tours in the expansion wars and now ran a back alley clinic. He brought medical supplies and a rifle. Santos came 10 minutes later, a scarred trader with a limp and a cargo hauler full of weapons that technically didn't exist in this sector. Beth Hayes arrived last, bringing 3 of her spaceport security team. She was a lean woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She'd lost family to the Corvin Syndicate years ago and jumped at the chance to make them bleed. "You know this is crazy," Beth said. helping Santos set up defensive positions. We're talking about professional killers backed by Silthari Empire resources. I know, Daniel replied, showing Lyra how to brace herself behind cover. But crazy's what we're good at. Speak for yourself. I'm just here for revenge. Beth caught sight of Lyra and did a double take. That's really her? The princess? Lyra's crest flattened in embarrassment. She wasn't used to humans knowing who she was. Yes, I'm sorry to bring trouble. Kid, anyone who pisses off the Corvins is fine by me. Beth checked her weapon. Besides, Daniel vouches for you. That's enough. Doc Williams had set up a medical station in the corner, but he kept his rifle close. How long until they come? Soon, Daniel said, checking the time. They'll want to hit us before we can prepare more. Ren is smart. She'll know we didn't just sit here waiting. He was right. 20 minutes before the hour was up, the lights in the sector went dark. Power cut, probably at the junction box 3 blocks away. Professional work. Here we go. Santos muttered, his thermal scope tracking movement outside. I count 8, no 10. They brought friends. Daniel's stomach tightened. 10 Corvin mercenaries against 7 defenders. One of whom was an injured dragon who'd never fought on the ground before. The math wasn't good. Positions, he ordered, falling into old command habits. Santos, watch the roof. Beth, your team takes the side entrance. Doc, you're with me on the main approach. Lyra, I fight, she said firmly. No hiding. He wanted to argue, but the look in her eyes stopped him. She needed this. Needed to prove she wasn't helpless. Stay with Doc, follow his lead. He'll keep you alive. The first explosion took out the front door. Not subtle, but effective. Smoke filled the shop as the Corvins rushed in, 3 of them moving with practiced coordination. They met a wall of gunfire. Daniel dropped the first one with 2 shots to the center mass. Beth's team caught another in crossfire, but the third made it through, and suddenly everything was chaos and close-quarters combat. Daniel fought with the efficiency of long experience, but he was older now, slower. A Corvin got inside his guard and he felt ribs crack from a brutal hit. He returned with an elbow to the throat and a knife to the gut. Dirty fighting that kept him alive. Beside him, Lyra discovered something important. Her broken wings didn't matter in ground combat. She was still Silthari, still stronger and faster than humans. Her claws tore through armor. Her tail swept legs out from under enemies. She fought with desperate fury, and it was terrifying to watch. West side, Santos shouted from above. 3 more coming through. The battle became a running fight through the shop. Daniel's knee gave out and he went down hard. A Corvin stood over him, weapon raised, and Daniel knew he was too slow to block. Lyra hit the mercenary like a meteor, all claws and teeth and rage. She'd never killed before, Daniel realized as he watched her. But she was learning fast, and centuries of warrior instinct were waking up in her blood. Doc Williams pulled Daniel up. You good? Good enough. His ribs screamed protest, but he could still fight. Watch the girl. The girl's doing fine on her own, it was true. Lyra had found her rhythm, fighting in a way no Silthari warrior would recognize, but that worked perfectly for someone who couldn't fly. She stayed low, used cover, struck from unexpected angles, human tactics applied by alien strength. The Corvins were pulling back, regrouping outside. They'd expected an easy fight, and instead they'd walked into organized resistance. But they weren't retreating. They were preparing for a second assault. Casualties, Daniel called out. One of mine took a hit, Beth reported. She'll live. Everyone else is bleeding but functional. Ammunition, half gone. We can't sustain another fight like that. Daniel knew she was right. They'd won the first round, but barely. The next assault would be harder, and they didn't have the resources for a prolonged defense. Rena's voice came over a loudspeaker, amplified and cold. Impressive, Reed, I underestimated you. But this is over. We have you surrounded. You're low on ammunition. Some of your people are injured. I'm offering one last chance. Send out the princess and we leave the rest of you alive. Lyra stepped forward, blood on her claws, her breathing heavy. I should go. You have done enough. No. Daniel grabbed her arm. That's not how this works, and they will kill you all, for me. This is not right. What's not right is letting murderers take you back to be executed. He turned to the others. Anyone wants to leave, now's the time. I won't hold it against you. Nobody moved. Santos spat on the floor. I'm too old to start making smart decisions now. Besides, Doc added, I've got a lot of med school debt. Figured I'd just die instead of paying it. Even Beth's wounded security guard laughed at that, though it came out as more of a wheeze. Daniel turned back to Lyra. You see, we chose this. Not because we have to, but because it's the right thing to do. Why? Tears were forming in her amber eyes, something he'd never seen before. Why do you care so much? Because 6 months ago someone cared enough about you to die making sure you got away. That matters. Because letting tyrants win without a fight means everything my friends died for in the wars meant nothing. Because you're a kid who deserves a chance at life, not execution. He squeezed her shoulder gently. Because you're my friend and I don't leave friends behind. Outside, the Corvins were moving into position for their final assault. Inside, a broken old soldier, a crippled princess, and 5 people who should have known better prepared for a fight they probably couldn't win. But in the moment before the shooting started again, Daniel caught Lyra's eye and saw something he hadn't seen before. Not just determination or fury, but hope. Fragile, uncertain hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way through this. Come on then, Daniel said to the darkness outside. Let's finish this. The second assault began with a rocket that blew a hole in the west wall. Santos fell back, cursing, his position compromised. They were inside now, fighting room to room through the shop Daniel had built with his own hands. He lost track of individual moments. Everything became reactions. Muscle memory from too many battles. Fire, move, cover. Check corners. Watch your back. Keep Lyra in sight because she was brave but inexperienced and would get herself killed trying to prove something. They were losing ground. Slowly, inevitably, being pushed back toward the rear of the shop. Beth went down with a leg wound. Doc was limping. Santos had a gash across his face that bled into his eyes. Daniel found himself back to back with Lyra in what used to be his living space. They were surrounded, low on ammunition, out of options. I am sorry, Lyra said quietly. I am sorry I brought this. Don't be sorry. Be ready. He had 1 grenade left, old military hardware he'd been saving for years. When I throw this, we rush them. All or nothing, she nodded, her tail swishing in anticipation. They'd die fighting. There were worse ways to go. Daniel pulled the pin, prepared to throw, and then everything changed. The roof exploded inward, but not from Corvin weapons. These were ship cannons, precision strikes that carved through the building without touching the defenders. Searchlights flooded the shop so bright they were blinding. A voice boomed through speakers, speaking in Silthari and then in English. Corvin forces. This is General Caney of the Silthari Royal Fleet. Cease hostile action immediately. Any further aggression against Princess Seraphine will be met with orbital bombardment. You have 30 seconds to comply. Daniel looked at Lyra, whose expression had gone from despair to shock. Caney, she whispered. He is my mother's general. He is alive. The Corvins weren't stupid. They knew when they were beaten. Within seconds, weapons were dropping, hands were raising. Rena stood in the middle of the shop, her expression controlled rage. But she was smart enough not to fight a warship. Armored Silthari soldiers dropped through the hole in the roof, moving with military precision. At their head was an old dragon, his scales scarred from 100 battles, his wings marked with Royal Guard insignia. He saw Lyra and stopped. For a long moment he just stared, then slowly he knelt, his wings spreading in a gesture of absolute respect. Princess, he said, his voice rough with emotion. We thought you dead. We have searched for months. Behind him every Silthari soldier knelt. In the ruins of a repair shop on a frontier world, they bowed to a crippled princess who'd survived because a stubborn human wouldn't let her die. Daniel lowered his weapon and let himself collapse against the wall, his ribs screaming, exhausted beyond words. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd kept her alive long enough for rescue to arrive. Lyra looked between the soldiers and Daniel, her expression torn. Then she did something that made every Silthari in the room tense. She knelt beside Daniel, checking his wounds with gentle claws. You are hurt, she said. I'm fine. You're safe. That's what matters. General Caney approached, studying Daniel with keen eyes. You protected the princess. The Empire owes you a debt beyond measuring. I don't want payment. Just want her to be okay. The old general's crest lifted in what might have been approval. You are strange human. Most would demand reward. I get that a lot, Daniel said, echoing Lyra's words from weeks ago. She caught the reference and made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. The Silthari medical bay was unlike anything Daniel had seen outside of core world hospitals. Crystalline technology hummed quietly, knitting his broken ribs back together while he sat on a bed that adjusted to his body perfectly. It had been 2 days since the battle, and he was still processing everything that had happened. Through the transparent walls, he could see the rest of General Kane's flagship. Hundreds of Silthari moved through corridors that seemed carved from light and metal. It was beautiful and alien and made him deeply uncomfortable. He was a frontier repair shop owner, not someone who belonged on royal warships. Doc Williams sat in the bed next to him, his own injuries being treated. Santos and Beth were somewhere else on the ship, also recovering. They'd all survived, though Beth's security guard had needed serious surgery. "Never thought I'd see the inside of a Silthari warship," Doc said, watching the medical scanner work on his leg. "Definitely never thought it'd be as a guest." "We're not guests. We're witnesses they can't get rid of yet." Daniel kept his voice low, aware that every word was probably being monitored. "Cynical. I like it," Doc grinned. "Think they'll actually let us go?" "If Lyra has any say in it, yeah." The door opened and General Caney entered, his wings folded tight to fit through the human-sized entrance. The old dragon moved with the careful precision of someone used to command, and his eyes missed nothing. "Daniel Reed," he said, the English words careful and formal. "You are healing well. Your medical tech is impressive. It is necessary. Warriors break often?" Caney settled onto a platform designed for Silthari anatomy. "I wish to understand something. You knew who the princess was, yes? You knew the danger? I figured it out. Yet you protected her, fought for her, nearly died for her." The general's crest rose in what might have been confusion. "Why, you are not Silthari. You owe our empire nothing. In fact, your people fought against us in the expansion wars." Daniel had been expecting this question. He'd been asking it himself, honestly. "I didn't do it for the empire. I did it for her." "For Lyra. Explain." "She was a kid who'd been hurt and was running for her life. That's all that mattered. Not politics, not species, just basic decency." Daniel met the general's eyes. "Besides, I've seen what coups do. What people like Vorath do when they get power. I spent 15 years fighting tyrants. Wasn't about to help one now." Caney was quiet for a long moment. "The princess speaks highly of you. Says you taught her that worth is not measured by wings or crowns. I taught her that being broken doesn't mean being finished. There's a difference. This concept is difficult for Silthari. We are warriors. Strength is everything. A dragon who cannot fly is seen as flawed." "Then maybe you need to change how you see things," Daniel said bluntly. "Lyra's got more courage in her than half the warriors I served with. She just needed someone to believe in her." The general's crest flattened, a sign of deep thought. "You challenge our ways. I challenge stupidity. Doesn't matter what species it comes from." To Daniel's surprise, Caney's crest lifted in what looked like approval. "I begin to understand why the princess values you. You do not treat her as royalty. You treat her as person, because that's what she is, not to most." Caney's tone grew somber. "When we return to Loyalist territory, there will be difficult decisions. The princess is rightful heir, but her injuries complicate matters. Many will question whether she can rule. Because she can't fly? Yes, it is foolish, I know this, but tradition is powerful, and the empire is fractured. We need strength, not questions." Daniel felt anger rise in his chest. "So what, you save her just to tell her she's not good enough? That's some gratitude. I do not make these decisions. I merely warn you of what comes." Caney stood, preparing to leave. "The princess has asked that you and your companions join her for evening meal. It would honor us if you accept, and we'll be there." After the general left, Doc whistled low. That was tense. "You know you just insulted a high-ranking alien military officer, right?" "Wasn't an insult. Was honesty. If he can't handle that, too bad." Doc laughed. "You're going to get us all killed with that attitude. We've already nearly been killed once this week. May as well make it count." That evening, they gathered in what the Silthari called a reflection room, a space with walls that showed the stars outside. Lyra was there, looking better than she had since Daniel found her. Her wounds had healed. Her scales had regained their luster, and she moved with more confidence. But her wings were still broken, still twisted against her back. She greeted each of them personally, thanking them in careful English. When she reached Daniel, she hesitated, then did something that made every Silthari in the room tense. She touched her forehead to his, a gesture of deep respect and affection that crossed species boundaries. You saved my life many times, she said quietly. I do not have words to thank you. You don't need words. Just be okay. That's thanks enough. The meal was an interesting mix of human and Silthari food, prepared by cooks who'd clearly been given a challenge. Santos made jokes that got translated badly and confused everyone. Beth told war stories that the Silthari soldiers listened to with keen interest. Doc somehow ended up in a debate about battlefield medicine with a Silthari surgeon. For a few hours, it felt almost normal. Not human normal or Silthari normal, but something new. A space where species differences mattered less than shared experiences. After the meal, Lyra asked Daniel to walk with her. They ended up on an observation deck, watching Ashgar rotate below them. The planet looked peaceful from orbit. No sign of the violence that had played out in Port Meridian. What happens now? Daniel asked. General Caney takes us to Loyalist stronghold. There are still many who oppose my uncle, but they are scattered. Afraid. She touched her broken wings absently. They need symbol, need leader. But I am broken, princess. Not what they expect. So prove them wrong. How? I cannot fly. Cannot fight as Silthari warriors fight. What can I offer? Daniel thought about how to answer. You know what I learned in the wars? The best leaders weren't always the strongest or the smartest. They were the ones who'd been through hell and came out still caring about their people. You've survived assassination, torture, months of running. You've learned things no sheltered princess would know. That's not weakness. That's education. But tradition also said a crippled dragon was worthless. You proved that wrong in my shop when you fought beside us. You're strong, smart, and you've got more guts than anyone I know. He turned to face her. The question isn't whether you're good enough. It's whether they're smart enough to recognize what they've got. Lyra's amber eyes reflected starlight. You have such faith in me. I've earned the right to. You've earned yours. He smiled slightly. Besides, you fixed power cells better than I ever could. That's gotta count for something. She made that sound again, half laugh, half sob. You make me believe things are possible. That's because they are. Won't be easy, but possible rarely is. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. Finally, Lyra asked, Will you stay? When we reach Loyalist territory? Will you help me? Daniel had been expecting this question too. The smart answer was no. He'd done his part, kept her alive, gotten her to safety. He could go back to his shop, rebuild, return to his quiet life of fixing things and trying to forget the past. But he'd been lying to himself about what he wanted, he realized. The past weeks, despite the danger and fear, had felt more real than the last 3 years combined. He'd remembered what it felt like to matter, to fight for something bigger than himself. Yeah, he said, I'll stay. Someone's got to keep you from doing anything too stupid. I am princess. I do not do stupid things. You tried to fight a Corvin mercenary who had 80 pounds on you. That was brave, not stupid. It was both. That's why you need me around. Lyra's crest lifted in a full smile, and Daniel realized he'd do just about anything to keep that expression on her face. She'd been through too much darkness. She deserved some light. Thank you, Daniel, for everything. Thank me when we've actually pulled this off. We've got a long way to go yet. Below them, Ashgar continued its rotation, and ahead of them, the war that would decide the Silthari Empire's future waited. But in that moment, on an observation deck between the stars, a broken old soldier and a crippled princess stood together and believed that maybe, just maybe, they could change the galaxy. It was a foolish belief, probably. But as Daniel had learned over a lifetime of war and survival, sometimes the foolish beliefs were the only ones worth having. General Caney found them there an hour later. We jump to Loyalist space in 6 hours, he announced. Be ready. What comes next will not be easy. Is it ever? Daniel replied. The general's crest lifted in what might have been amusement. No, but that is what makes it worthwhile. As they headed back inside, Daniel caught Doc's eye. His friend raised an eyebrow, a silent question. Are we really doing this? Daniel nodded. Yeah, they were really doing this. Santos appeared beside them, grinning. So we're going to war again. Just like old times. Except this time we're fighting for a dragon princess to reclaim her throne from an evil uncle. That's new. Details, Santos shrugged. Fighting's fighting. Beth joined them, walking with only a slight limp now. My security team's staying too. Figured we'd see this through. They were crazy, all of them. A bunch of broken people with nothing to lose deciding to take on an empire. It should have been terrifying. Instead, Daniel felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. Purpose, he thought. This was what it felt like to have purpose again. Lyra walked ahead of them, her broken wings catching the light, her steps steady despite everything she'd been through. She'd survived because she was strong and smart and refused to give up. Now she just needed to make everyone else see what Daniel had seen from the beginning, that she was exactly what the Empire needed. Broken wings and all. The Loyalist stronghold was built into an asteroid field, hidden from casual scans and protected by enough firepower to make attacking it suicide. As General Caney's flagship approached, Daniel counted at least 30 warships and twice that many support vessels. The resistance was bigger than he'd expected. Lyra stood beside him on the bridge, watching her people prepare for their arrival. She'd been quiet since they jumped into this system, her tail wrapped tight around her legs in nervousness. "They're going to judge you," Daniel said quietly, probably harshly. "You ready for that?" "No, but I must do this anyway." She glanced at him. "You will be there?" "Right beside you. Annoying everyone with my human opinions." That got a small smile from her, which was all he'd been aiming for. The landing bay was massive, carved from the asteroid itself and reinforced with Silthari engineering. As they disembarked, Daniel saw hundreds of dragons gathered, their wings spread in formal greeting. At the front stood a council of older Silthari, their scales marked with insignia of rank and honor. General Caney led them forward, and the crowd's murmurs grew louder as they saw Lyra's broken wings. Daniel heard words he recognized from his military days. Damaged, flawed, broken. His hands clenched into fists, but Lyra touched his arm gently, shaking her head. She'd expected this. The lead council member, an ancient dragon whose scales had faded to pale silver, stepped forward. "Princess Seraphine Lyra, we thought you lost. The Empire celebrates your survival. Thank you, Elder Finn." Lyra's voice was steady, formal. "I am grateful to be among loyal Silthari again. Your survival changes much. With the royal line intact, we can rally support against the usurper." Finn's eyes moved to her wings and his crest flattened. "However, there are concerns. Tradition demands that our rulers demonstrate strength. Your injuries, while unfortunate, present difficulties." There it was, the thing they'd all been dancing around. Lyra couldn't fly, therefore she couldn't rule. "I survived assassination," Lyra said, her voice carrying across the bay. "I survived torture. I survived months of running. I am alive when my entire family is dead. Is this not strength?" "Physical strength, yes. But symbolic strength." "With respect, Elder Finn," Daniel interrupted, stepping forward. Every Silthari eye turned to him, and he felt the weight of their attention. "Maybe it's time to rethink what strength means. And you are?" Finn's tone was cold. "Daniel Reed, human, former soldier, current friend of the princess." He met the elder's eyes without flinching. "I've fought in wars across a dozen systems. You know what I learned? The strongest warriors aren't always the ones who can fly highest or hit hardest. They're the ones who keep fighting when everything's broken. You speak of things you do not understand, human. You are not Silthari." "No, but I understand survival. I understand what it takes to lead people through hell." Daniel gestured to Lyra. "She's been through more in 6 months than most of your warriors face in a lifetime. She's learned things no sheltered princess would know. She's adapted, overcome, survived. That's not weakness. That's exactly what your empire needs right now." The crowd was murmuring, some in agreement, many in outrage. An outsider challenging their traditions wasn't going to win him friends. But Lyra stepped forward, her broken wings spreading as far as they could. "I will not hide my injuries. I will not pretend to be something I am not. I am damaged, yes. I cannot fly. But I can lead. I can fight. I can protect my people." Her voice grew stronger. "My uncle Vorath seized power through murder and fear. He represents the old ways, the belief that strength is only physical, that power justifies any action. I represent something different, and what is that?" Finn asked, though his tone suggested genuine curiosity now. "Adaptability, resilience, the understanding that we are stronger together than apart." She looked at Daniel, at Doc and Santos and Beth standing behind him. "These humans taught me that. They risked their lives for me when they owed me nothing. They fought beside me despite their own injuries. They showed me that worth is not measured by perfection but by choice." General Caney stepped forward, I have seen the princess in battle. She fought with courage and skill, adapted her combat style to her limitations. She inspired loyalty in those around her. These are qualities of leadership. Another council member spoke up, younger than Finn. But can she unite the houses? Can she rally warriors who believe in tradition? The war against Vorath requires strength, not philosophy. Then let me prove myself, Lyra said. Give me a chance. Let me speak to the houses, to the warriors, to the people. Let them decide if I am worthy. Finn considered this. And if they reject you? If they demand a different heir, then I will step aside. But I will not hide. I will not run. I have done enough running. The old dragon's crest lifted slightly. You have your mother's fire, very well. You will address the gathered forces tomorrow. Convince them, and we will support your claim. Fail, and we must find another path. It was more than Daniel had expected. He'd thought they might imprison Lyra or worse. Instead, they were giving her a chance. That night, in quarters assigned to them, Lyra paced nervously while Daniel and the others tried to help her prepare her speech. I do not know what to say, she admitted. How do I convince warriors to follow Crippled Princess? You don't, Daniel said. You convince them to follow a leader who understands sacrifice, who knows what it costs to survive, who won't send them to die for pride alone. But I have no experience, no victories, no achievements. You survived. That's an achievement. You learned. That's victory. He leaned forward. Listen, Lyra, you're trying to be what you think they want. Stop. Be what they need instead. What do they need? Hope, a reason to believe this fight is worth it. Your uncle rules through fear. You can offer something different. Not just another tyrant with shinier scales, Santos added. Talk to them like you talk to us, not as subjects, as people. That's what made you worth fighting for. But I am not good speaker. I am young, damaged. So use that, Beth said. Don't pretend to be perfect. Show them the scars and explain what they taught you. Perfection is boring. Growth is inspiring. They worked late into the night, helping Lyra craft not a speech but a story. Her story. The truth of what she'd survived and what she'd learned. The next morning, the main gathering hall was packed with hundreds of Silthari warriors, representatives from loyalist houses, and military leaders. Daniel stood at the back with his friends, giving Lyra space but staying close enough to support her if needed. Elder Finn introduced her formally, listing her titles and bloodline. Then Lyra stepped forward alone, her broken wings visible to everyone. She began in Silthari, her voice carrying through the hall. Daniel's translator earpiece gave him the words a second later. I stand before you broken, she said. My wings will never fly. My body carries scars that will never fully heal. I have run, hidden, and nearly died more times than I can count. By every traditional measure, I am weak, unworthy, damaged. The hall was silent, everyone waiting. But I am alive. My family is dead, murdered by my uncle Vorath in his hunger for power. He killed them because they were strong in the ways we have always valued. Proud, powerful, uncompromising. He knew they would never bend, so he broke them. She spread her broken wings as wide as they would go. I survived because I learned to bend, to adapt, to accept help from unlikely sources. A human soldier taught me that being broken is not the same as being finished. That true strength is not in never falling, but in rising afterward. Lyra walked forward, her movements confident despite her disabilities. I cannot offer you a leader who has never been defeated. I can only offer you a leader who knows the cost of defeat and chooses to fight anyway. I cannot promise you easy victory. I can only promise that I will stand with you, adapt with you, and never ask you to face anything I would not face myself. She paused, letting her words sink in. My uncle believes power comes from fear and dominance. I believe it comes from loyalty, from trust, from the bonds between those who fight side by side. He sees weakness in diversity. I see strength. The humans who protected me were not Silthari, but they bled for me anyway. They taught me that an empire built on rigid tradition is brittle. One built on adaptation and respect is unbreakable. A murmur ran through the crowd, but it didn't sound hostile now. It sounded thoughtful. I am Princess Seraphine Lyra. I am damaged. I am young. I am inexperienced in ways that matter to you. But I am here, alive when I should be dead. I am standing when I should have given up. And I am asking you to take a chance on something different. Not because I am perfect, but because perfection is a lie. The only truth is what we choose to do when everything breaks. She met the eyes of warriors throughout the hall. Choose to follow me, and I promise you this. I will never lie to you about the cost of this war. I will never hide behind tradition when adaptation serves us better. I will never ask you to die for my pride. I will lead from the front, broken wings and all, because that is what leadership means. Not flying above everyone else, but standing beside them. When she finished, the hall was silent for a long moment. Then, from the back, General Caney stepped forward and knelt, wings spread in formal submission. I follow Princess Seraphine, he said clearly. Not because tradition demands it, but because she has earned my loyalty. Another warrior stood, then another. Within minutes, half the hall was kneeling. Not all. There were still skeptics and traditionalists. But enough. More than enough. Elder Finn watched this with an expression that might have been approval. Finally, he spoke. The houses have spoken. Princess Seraphine Lyra is recognized as rightful heir and leader of the Loyalist forces. May she prove worthy of the trust placed in her. Daniel felt something tight in his chest release. She'd done it. Not through deception or force, but through simple honesty. She'd shown them her scars and asked them to see strength instead of weakness. Later, after formal ceremonies and political discussions that made Daniel's head hurt, he found Lyra on an observation platform. She was staring at the stars, her expression unreadable. You did good, he said, joining her. I am terrified, she admitted. They believe in me. What if I fail them? Then you'll adapt and try again. That's what you're good at. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's just what you do. He leaned against the railing. You know, when I left the military, I thought my life was over. Thought I'd used up all my purpose in the wars. But then I found you bleeding in an alley and everything changed. I changed your life? You reminded me what it felt like to matter. To fight for something worth fighting for. He smiled at her. So thank you for that. I should thank you. You saved my life many times. We saved each other. That's how this works. They stood together watching the stars, and Daniel thought about how strange life was. 6 months ago, he'd been a broken old soldier fixing machines on a frontier planet. Now he was advisor to a dragon princess preparing to fight a civil war across the stars. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was probably going to get him killed. He'd never felt more alive. The war against Vorath would be long and brutal. There would be losses, setbacks, moments of despair. But standing there with Lyra, Daniel believed they could win, not because they were strongest or because fate favored them, but because they'd learned the same lesson from their scars. That being broken didn't mean being finished. It just meant you had to fight differently. Behind them, the Loyalist fleet prepared for war. Ahead of them, an empire waited to be reclaimed. And between them, a friendship that crossed species and circumstances, built on mutual respect and the understanding that worth was earned, not given. Daniel Reed had spent years trying to forget he was a soldier, trying to pretend he didn't miss having purpose. But purpose had found him anyway, in the form of a crippled dragon who refused to give up. As Lyra turned to head back inside, preparing for the challenges ahead, Daniel followed. Not as a protector anymore, though he'd always defend her. Not as a soldier following orders, but as a friend standing beside someone who taught him that broken pieces could still be sharp, still be useful, still matter. The galaxy was big and cold and full of dangers, but they'd face it together, and that made all the difference.